Welcome back to our channel. Today we delve into the life of Queen Jane Seymour, one of Henry VIII's most fascinating and controversial wives. While history often paints her as the obedient and quiet queen, the reality is far more complex. Beneath her serene exterior lay a chilling and strategic side that played a key role in her rise to power. Join us as we uncover the triumphs, scandals, and ultimate tragedy that defined Jane Seymour's life. Jane Seymour is often remembered as the angelic, obedient wife of Henry VIII, a queen who brought peace and stability to a tumultuous court. But beneath this serene image lies a story filled with ambition, heartbreak, and a chilling dark side that history often glosses over. Jane's journey to the throne was anything but innocent. She navigated the dangerous waters of Tudor politics with calculated precision, rising from a lady-in-waiting to one of the most powerful women in England. Though her reign as queen was brief, it was marked by both triumph and deep tragedy. She gave Henry what he desired most, a male heir, but at a devastating personal cost. And while she was celebrated as Henry's most beloved queen, his shocking words during her labor revealed a heartless truth about their relationship. Jane Seymour's legacy is far more complex than the history books suggest. There's still some debate about Jane Seymour's exact birthplace. Historians suggest it might have been Wolfhall Manor in Wiltshire or Westbower Farm in Somerset. Jane was the daughter of Sir John Seymour, a crown hunter in the Savernake Forest, and Lady Marjorie Wentworth, the daughter of Sir Henry Wentworth. Her father hailed from an Anglo-Norman noble family rooted in Wiltshire, whose surname Seymour was derived from the village of Saint-Maur-sur-Loire in Touraine. The family's rise to prominence began when Roger de Saint-Maur married Lady Maud, the daughter of Sir William Estermy. Through her mother's lineage, Jane was a descendant of Lionel, Duke of Clarence, the son of King Edward III, making her a distant relative of her future husband, Henry VIII. Her father, Sir John Seymour, had a distinguished career. He served under Henry VII during the Battle of Blackheath and later accompanied Henry VIII on campaigns in France, including the famed Field of the Cloth of Gold. For his service, he was knighted as a banneret in 1513, earning the title of Sir. Sir John and Lady Marjorie married on October 22, 1494, and had 10 children. Despite her husband's death, Lady Marjorie never remarried, a choice historians like Elizabeth Norton suggest was indicative of a happy marriage. Among their 10 children, Jane was the 5th, growing up primarily at Wolfhall Manor alongside her siblings Thomas and Elizabeth, with whom she was particularly close. Though her birth year remains uncertain, it's estimated to be between 1507 and 1509. Jane's education was less formal compared to Henry's previous wives, Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. While her father ensured she learned to read and write, placing her above many women of her time, Jane excelled in domestic skills such as sewing, a talent that earned her lasting admiration. Some of her embroidery works were displayed in museums centuries later. She also received religious instruction and learned a bit of French and Latin, though her knowledge was deemed suitable for a respectable household lady rather than a queen. Jane's early life was relatively quiet. Her eldest brother, John, died of illness in 1510, while her younger siblings, Marjorie and Anthony, succumbed to the sweating sickness in 1528. This cast a shadow over the Seymour family, but her brother Edward rose to prominence, serving in the household of Mary Tudor, Queen of France, and later ascending rapidly in the English court. Another brother, Thomas, followed a similar path of success, inspiring Jane to seek opportunities beyond Wolfhall Manor. She remained unmarried into her 20s, possibly due to her lack of a substantial dowry. Her younger sister Elizabeth married earlier due to her striking beauty, which might have left Jane feeling overlooked. Eventually, seeking better prospects, Jane decided to serve at the court of Henry VIII, a decision that would forever change her life. Jane Seymour's entry into the English court marked the beginning of a carefully navigated journey through one of the most dangerous political landscapes of the Tudor era. She first arrived as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catalina of Aragon, a position that gave her a front-row seat to the dramatic unraveling of Catalina's marriage to King Henry VIII. During her time at court, Jane Seymour served as a lady-in-waiting to Princess Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon and future Queen Mary I of England. Jane deeply admired both Catherine and Mary for their strong Catholic faith and unwavering dignity, treating Mary as the rightful heir to the English throne. However, Jane's loyalty to Catherine of Aragon put her at odds with Anne, who was rising in power as King Henry's mistress and soon to be queen. Jane's time at court was fraught with tension. Anne's growing influence divided the court, creating a mini-court of her own supporters. Jane, like many others, disapproved of Anne's bold and often ostentatious behavior. After the Legatine trial, where Catherine of Aragon defended her marriage to Henry VIII, Jane was rumored to have openly mocked Anne, convinced that her cousin's audacious climb to power would eventually lead to her downfall. In November 1531, Catherine was exiled to the Moor, a remote residence in Hertfordshire, signaling the beginning of her isolation. As part of Catherine's household, Jane likely accompanied her during this challenging time. The deteriorating conditions of the residence were a calculated move by Henry to pressure Catherine into accepting the annulment of their marriage, a demand she steadfastly refused. By August 1533, Catherine was relocated to Buckingham Palace with only a small retinue of attendants. Records show that Jane was no longer part of this diminished household and had returned to her family's home at Wolfhall after 5 years at court. This abrupt departure marked a setback in Jane's ambitions, as she had hoped her service at court would lead to a favorable marriage. Back at Wolfhall, Jane's prospects dimmed further due to a scandal involving her brother Edward's wife, who was accused of infidelity. The Seymour family's tarnished reputation left Jane without suitors for some time. In mid-1534, a marriage proposal from William Dormer, heir to the Dormer family of Buckinghamshire, briefly offered hope. However, the match fell through when William's parents opposed the union, citing Jane's modest dowry and the family's declining status. This rejection was a harsh reminder of Jane's limited social standing and the challenges she faced in securing a marriage. Left without options, she returned to a quiet life at Wolfhall, spending her days sewing, riding, and hunting on her family's estate. Little did Jane know that her fortunes were about to change in a way that would alter the course of English history forever. During her time at court, Jane Seymour served as a lady-in-waiting to Princess Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon and future Queen Mary of England. Jane deeply admired both Catherine and Mary for their strong Catholic faith and unwavering dignity, treating Mary as the rightful heir to the English throne. However, Jane's relationship with Anne Boleyn, the next Henry's wife, her distant cousin, was far less amicable. Jane and Anne shared a common ancestor, Elizabeth Cheney, but this connection did little to foster a bond between them. While Anne's mother, Lady Elizabeth Howard, was a product of Elizabeth Cheney's first marriage, Jane's mother, Marjorie Wentworth, came from her second. This made Jane socially junior to Anne, and their relationship became further strained due to their conflicting allegiances. Jane's loyalty to Catherine of Aragon put her at odds with Anne, who was rising in power as King Henry's mistress and soon to be queen. Jane's time at court was fraught with tension. Anne's growing influence divided the court, creating a mini-court of her own supporters. Jane, like many others, disapproved of Anne's bold and often ostentatious behavior. After the Legatine trial, where Catherine of Aragon defended her marriage to Henry VIII, Jane was rumored to have openly mocked Anne, convinced that her cousin's audacious climb to power would eventually lead to her downfall. In November 1531, Catherine was exiled to the Moor, a remote residence in Hertfordshire, signaling the beginning of her isolation. As part of Catherine's household, Jane likely accompanied her during this challenging time. The deteriorating conditions of the residence were a calculated move by Henry to pressure Catherine into accepting the annulment of their marriage, a demand she steadfastly refused. By August 1533, Catherine was relocated to Buckingham Palace with only a small retinue of attendants. Records show that Jane was no longer part of this diminished household and had returned to her family's home at Wolfhall after 5 years at court. This abrupt departure marked a setback in Jane's ambitions, as she had hoped her service at court would lead to a favorable marriage. Back at Wolfhall, Jane's prospects dimmed further due to a scandal involving her brother Edward's wife, who was accused of infidelity. The Seymour family's tarnished reputation left Jane without suitors for some time. In mid-1534, a marriage proposal from William Dormer, heir to the Dormer family of Buckinghamshire, briefly offered hope. However, the match fell through when William's parents opposed the union, citing Jane's modest dowry and the family's declining status. This rejection was a harsh reminder of Jane's limited social standing and the challenges she faced in securing a marriage. Left without options, she returned to a quiet life at Wolfhall, spending her days sewing, riding, and hunting on her family's estate. Little did Jane know that her fortunes were about to change in a way that would alter the course of English history forever. When Catalina fell from favor, Jane demonstrated her ability to adapt and survive by seamlessly transitioning to serve Anne Boleyn, Henry's next queen. This move was anything but simple. It required a keen sense of courtly dynamics and the tact to align herself with the new queen while maintaining her own position. Jane's quiet demeanor and apparent loyalty made her an asset to Anne, but beneath this calm exterior, she was learning valuable lessons about life at court and the dangers of being too close to the throne. By 1536, Anne Boleyn's inability to produce a male heir had begun to erode her influence. Jane, ever observant and calculating, was ready to step into the spotlight. As Henry's frustrations with Anne grew, his gaze began to shift toward Jane, whose calm and composed personality stood in stark contrast to Anne's fiery and controversial nature. Jane's transition from loyal lady-in-waiting to potential queen was not merely a twist of fate. It was the result of her ability to read the room, play her cards right, and position herself as the antidote to the chaos surrounding Anne. At court, whispers of Henry's growing affection for Jane began to circulate, and it was clear she understood the significance of this attention. While Anne's boldness had captivated Henry in the past, Jane's gentler and more subdued approach offered the king something new, an air of stability and submission that he now craved. Little did Anne know, her successor was already waiting in the wings, quietly preparing for her own rise to power. Henry VIII's pursuit of Jane Seymour marked a dramatic shift in court dynamics, one that was as scandalous as it was strategic. Known for his grand gestures, Henry began openly showering Jane with expensive gifts, the most notable being a locket necklace containing his portrait. While Jane's outward demeanor remained calm and composed, her actions suggested a keen understanding of the power she held over both the king and her rival, Anne Boleyn. In one particularly bold moment, Jane provocatively snapped the locket open and shut in Anne's presence, ensuring the Queen caught glimpses of Henry's face. The act was as calculated as it was cruel. Anne, already under immense pressure from her inability to produce a male heir, was enraged. In a fit of fury, she ripped the locket from Jane's neck so forcefully that her own fingers bled. This wasn't just a clash between two women. It was a symbolic moment that revealed the crumbling foundations of Anne's position as queen, and Jane's quiet rise to power. Rumors soon began to swirl about Jane's deeper involvement in Anne's downfall. According to court gossip, Anne miscarried a male child after walking in on Jane, sitting casually on Henry's lap, a sight that would have been both humiliating and devastating for the embattled queen. Whether this event directly led to Anne's miscarriage, or was simply a piece of Tudor-era propaganda, it's clear that Jane played her role in shifting Henry's affections away from Anne. Anne Boleyn's fate was sealed on May 19, 1536, when she was executed on charges of adultery and treason, accusations many believe were fabricated to clear the way for Jane. Shockingly, Henry wasted no time mourning his second wife. The very next day, he and Jane became betrothed, a move that sent shockwaves through the court. Just 10 days later, in a private ceremony at Whitehall Palace, Henry and Jane were married. Jane's swift rise from lady-in-waiting to queen was nothing short of meteoric, but it came with a heavy price. The spectacle surrounding Anne's fall and Jane's ascension underscored the ruthless nature of Henry's court, a place where survival often required cunning, patience, and a willingness to seize opportunities, no matter the cost. On May 20th, 1536, just one day after Anne Boleyn's execution, Jane Seymour became officially betrothed to King Henry VIII. The swiftness of their engagement shocked the court, as Henry wasted no time in moving forward. On the very day Anne was beheaded, Henry reportedly rode to the Thames, where he had arranged a graceful new residence for Jane, symbolizing her swift ascent to the throne. Their wedding took place just 10 days later, on May 30th, 1536, in a private ceremony at Whitehall Palace. By June 4th of that year, Jane was formally announced as Queen of England. Her motto, "Bound to obey and serve," reflected a submissive and dutiful image that sharply contrasted with the fiery independence of Anne Boleyn. Her personal emblem, a crowned phoenix and a castle, signified both rebirth and stability, aligning with Henry's hopes for a peaceful reign under her influence. Jane Seymour's reign as queen began under an ominous shadow, foreshadowing the tragic events that would later define her story. While Henry VIII expressed his desire to hold a grand coronation for his new wife, the outbreak of the plague in London provided a convenient excuse for repeated delays in the ceremony. Officially, these postponements were for safety reasons, but some historians suggest a different motive. Many experts believe Henry was hedging his bets, unwilling to crown Jane until she proved herself by delivering what he desired most, a male heir to secure his legacy. This cautious approach raises questions about how secure Jane's position as queen truly was in the early days of her marriage, adding another layer of complexity to her brief and tumultuous time on the throne. Jane's calm demeanor and ability to control her emotions made her a stark contrast to her predecessor. Henry, weary from his tumultuous marriage to Anne, found solace in Jane's steady presence. To cement her position, Henry granted Jane an impressive dowry, including 104 manors spread across 4 counties, along with forests and hunting grounds, securing her financial independence as queen. However, Jane was never officially crowned due to an outbreak of plague sweeping England at the time. Some speculate that Henry postponed the coronation intentionally, waiting for Jane to fulfill her ultimate duty, providing a male heir. As queen, Jane established a markedly different court compared to her predecessors. Her actions painted a very different picture from the meek and mild good girl image often associated with her. The moment she became Henry VIII's lawful wife, she wasted no time in dismantling the indulgent and hedonistic lifestyle cultivated by her predecessor, Anne Boleyn. In its place, Jane emphasized dignity and decorum. While it's easy to assume that her reserved nature reflected a preference for simplicity, there's evidence suggesting her motives ran much deeper. Queen Jane issued strict mandates requiring her ladies-in-waiting to adhere to a stringent code of conduct. They were to remain virtuous and dedicate themselves to serving God and living righteously. Remember, Jane herself began as a lady-in-waiting before capturing Henry's attention, so perhaps there was a touch of insecurity fueling these orders. But Jane didn't stop there. She took things a step further, rejecting the lavish courtly functions that Anne had relished and even attempting to erase Anne's influence entirely. Anne Boleyn was renowned for her sophisticated fashion sense, inspired by the chic trends of continental France. Jane, however, banned such attire outright. Yes, when you're queen, you can outlaw clothes. And Jane wasn't shy about imposing her peculiar preferences. Besides, in politics, Jane was cautious and avoided direct involvement, in stark contrast to Anne Boleyn's assertive interference. There were only two instances where Jane openly voiced her opinions. First, when she expressed sympathy for the rebels involved in the Pilgrimage of Grace, and second, when she urged Henry not to destroy England's ancient monasteries. Henry, however, swiftly reminded Jane of her place, warning her against meddling in his decisions. This difference in approach highlights Jane's ability to navigate court politics with a sense of restraint that Anne had often lacked. Jane's devout Catholic faith also influenced her actions as queen. She played a pivotal role in reconciling King Henry with his eldest daughter, Princess Mary, who had been estranged following Henry's divorce from Catherine of Aragon. Jane's efforts restored Mary to favor at court, earning her respect from both Catholics and supporters of traditional values. Queen Jane knew her value and made sure others recognized it. She demanded that her servants go to extraordinary lengths just to be graced by her presence. To appear before the queen, women were required to wear a pearl belt adorned with at least 120 gemstones. Fail to meet this standard, Jane wouldn't even acknowledge you. Her story reveals a woman who knew how to wield her authority, setting boundaries and enforcing rules that ensured she was more than just another consort. She wasn't simply nice. She was calculated, assertive, and knew exactly how to command respect. Jane Seymour's primary duty as queen was to provide King Henry VIII with a male heir. Soon after their marriage, Jane became pregnant, but tragically suffered a miscarriage. However, in January 1537, hope returned as Jane conceived again. During her pregnancy, Jane famously craved quail, and Henry, eager to please her, ordered the delicacy to be delivered from Calais and Flanders. Throughout the summer, Jane was kept out of public view under the close supervision of England's finest physicians, and a team of midwives constantly at her side. On October 12, 1537, after 2 days and 3 grueling nights of labor, Jane gave birth to Henry's long-awaited son Edward at Hampton Court Palace. Her child was christened just 3 days later, on October 15th, though Jane, following tradition, was absent from the ceremony due to her fragile condition. The exhausting labor had taken a severe toll on Jane, leaving her physically drained. Though she initially showed signs of recovery, signing letters and even receiving guests, her health took a sudden turn for the worse on October 16th. By October 18th, the symptoms of postpartum infection became undeniable, and her condition rapidly deteriorated. Despite the efforts of her physicians, Jane passed away on October 24th, 1537, at 2 a.m., almost exactly 12 days after giving birth. Following her death, a legend emerged claiming that Jane had died from a cesarean section, a procedure believed to have been ordered to save Edward. However, this theory was quickly debunked, as Jane clearly survived for over 10 days after her labor. At just 29 years old, Jane had served as Queen of England for less than 2 years. Her funeral, arranged by Henry VIII, was held at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. It was led by Mary Tudor, Henry's daughter, whom Jane had helped reconcile with the king during her lifetime. Mary's grief was evident as she took charge of the proceedings, but eventually handed over responsibilities to the Marquis of Exeter, overcome with sorrow. Jane was the only one of Henry VIII's wives to receive a queen's funeral, complete with all the grandeur befitting a royal consort. Her coffin was adorned with both the Seymour and Tudor crests and was carried in a solemn procession cloaked in black. Henry VIII mourned her deeply, wearing black for 3 months and delaying his next marriage for 3 years, a rare display of emotion for the often stoic king. Jane's short reign as queen left a profound legacy, not only as the mother of Edward VI, but also as the wife Henry VIII remembered most fondly. Her life and death continue to captivate historians and inspire tales of triumph and tragedy in equal measure. Jane Seymour's time as queen was brief, and her background lacked the prominence of Catherine of Aragon or the political dynamism of Anne Boleyn. Because of this, Jane is often considered the most overlooked and subdued of Henry VIII's 6 wives, with relatively little scholarly focus on her life. However, her quiet rise to power reveals a woman with significant ambition and patience. Many historians believe Jane's calculated ascent mirrors Anne Boleyn's, though she lacked Anne's charisma, education, and the unshakable support of her family. This forced Jane to approach her position with extreme caution, navigating court politics with subtlety. She made her political stance clear in 2 instances. First, when she showed compassion for the Catholic monasteries being dissolved under Henry's rule, and second, when she sympathized with the pilgrims involved in the Pilgrimage of Grace. Some speculate that had Jane lived longer after giving birth to Edward, she might have played a powerful role as regent for her son, shaping England's future as one of its most influential queens. Despite her untimely death, Jane Seymour's impact on English history was immense. By giving birth to Henry's only legitimate male heir, Edward VI, she secured the Seymour family's rise to power. Her brothers, Edward and Thomas Seymour, capitalized on their newfound influence at court. Edward Seymour was eventually named Duke of Somerset and Lord Protector during Edward VI's reign, effectively becoming the de facto ruler of England. However, the power struggles that followed led to both brothers' downfall and eventual executions. While Jane Seymour is often remembered as King Henry VIII's most beloved wife, her portrayal in films, novels, and media often takes a secondary role compared to the fiery Anne Boleyn or the dignified Catherine of Aragon. Her story, while quieter, is no less compelling, rising from a modest noble family to become Queen of England and elevating her family to great heights of influence. Yet, her image as a humble, obedient queen has often made her appear less dynamic in popular culture. Jane Seymour first graced the silver screen in the 1933 film The Private Life of Henry VIII, where she was portrayed by Wendy Berry. Her character made subsequent appearances in various adaptations, including Anne of the Thousand Days, with Leslie Patterson playing Jane, the 2-part TV drama Henry VIII, where Amelia Fox portrayed Jane BBC Two's Wolf Hall, where Kate Phillips brought Jane's character to life, showing her quiet strength and political significance. Jane Seymour's life has also been reimagined in novels, where authors explore her personality, ambitions, and struggles. Carolee Erickson's The Favored Queen offers a perspective of Jane from her early days as Catherine of Aragon's lady-in-waiting to her untimely death. Hilary Mantel's acclaimed Wolf Hall series, including Bring Up the Bodies and The Mirror and the Light, portrays Jane as a reserved yet ambitious woman guided by her family's influence in navigating court politics. Alison Weir, renowned for her works on Tudor history, made Jane Seymour the protagonist of her third book in the 6 Tudor Queen series, Jane Seymour, The Haunted Queen. Jane also appears in musical and theatrical works, often in supporting roles. In Donizetti's opera, Anne Boleyn, she is portrayed as Giovanna Seymour, the lady-in-waiting who ultimately captures King Henry's heart. Additionally, the 19th century ballad The Death of Queen Jane, attributed to Francis James Child, reflects the legend surrounding her tragic death. This ballad critiques the circumstances of Jane's death, describing a queen who endured a harrowing 6-week labor, culminating in a cesarean procedure that led to her demise. While the story remains speculative, it is widely believed to reference Jane Seymour, who died shortly after giving birth to Edward VI. Jane's legacy lies in the lasting prominence she brought to the Seymour family, whose descendants continue to hold the title of Duke of Somerset to this day. Her ultimate achievement was not only securing the Tudor dynasty's continuation, but also elevating her family to a position of enduring influence in English history. Though Henry VIII was known for his volatile relationships with his wives, he always referred to Jane as my true wife and true love. Before his death, he ordered that he be buried beside her in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Jane achieved what no other wife could, giving Henry his longed-for son, and her death was commemorated with the greatest reverence of all his queens. Some historians argue that Jane's death fundamentally changed Henry VIII, leading to his relentless pursuit of more wives in an attempt to secure additional male heirs. This pursuit ultimately created the infamous narrative of Henry VIII's 6 wives, forever cementing their place in history. Jane Seymour may have been Henry's quietest queen, but her legacy resounds as one of triumph, tragedy, and undeniable influence. Jane Seymour's life was a blend of ambition, tragedy, and triumph. From her calculated ascent to the throne to her heartbreaking end, she remains one of Tudor history's most enigmatic figures. Though she is often remembered as Henry VIII's true queen, her story reveals much more than devotion. It unveils the sacrifices and complexities behind her brief reign. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed exploring the untold side of Jane Seymour's life, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more captivating stories from history.